Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to Richard Skipper Celebrates. Sorry for the delay for all of you who have been so patient. Thank you. All kinds of glitches are going on. My computer lights are off. My microphones went out, but we're going to do a show. That's what show business is all about. It's showing up and delivering the goods. I have four incredible artists waiting in the wings, and hopefully another one on the way. He was here, and then when everything disappeared, he disappeared. So, Gary, if you can hear me, you're not in the studio. You somehow need to get back in the studio so I can at least see you on screen. So, today, what I want to talk about is the word thrift and what thrift means to those of us who are in the arts, whether it's being thrifty with our talent or whether it's being thrifty with how we produce a show or how we get a show produced. That's what today's show is all about. And I looked up the word thrift, and an interesting uh, definition that came up is, about how we all work together in terms of making it all work. And no one knows who I'm going to bring on first, so I'm going to push a button and see who comes on. So I hope you're all ready.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Jay Aubrey Jones.
Hello.
How are you, Jay?
I'm well, thanks, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
My
I don't know what's going on. My microphone is still not working,
Oh,
so hopefully
no.
it's not dead. So speaking of thrift,
Right,
so Jay, before we
technology.
jump into today's topic, let's talk about you and what you're
Okay.
doing currently. Anything you want to promote or get the word out about anything, now is the time to do so.
Okay, well, there is something, but the contract hasn't been signed yet, so I can't talk about it just yet. And I'm going to be doing another concert with theatrical wunderkind Charles Kirsch on
Harvard.
yes, Harvard-bound
Yes.
wunderkind Charles
Yes.
Kirsch. Yay! This is going to be a uh, early concert version of Drat the Cat called Cat and Mouse.
Yes, I was reading about that.
Yes.
Now, you're going to be doing that at 54 Below or in another theater?
No, I believe it's going to be at Theater AMT.
I just walked
The
past
AMT
the theater earlier today.
Mhm.
They're currently doing Drat the Cat.
Right.
Is it part of that series?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about thrift and what thrift means to you.
Okay.
What does it mean to you as an artist?
Simplicity. We were always taught to, how can I put this, not embroider when we're working, to make everything as simple and direct as possible, the simplest way of communicating, of getting the playwright's words out to the audience, and to economize gesture and interpretation.
And has there ever been a time where what you were working with, as far
Mhm.
as that concept, was completely not in alignment with what your director wanted for you or from you? And if so, how do you get around that?
Actually, yes, there was a time where that did happen. This was some 41 years ago. And I knew what this director was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think also there was, I think I can say this now, I think there was a portion of him that really wanted to play the part that I was playing.
I've been there, done that. Yes.
Mhm. So I was able to strip away his envy and just continue to concentrate on my work.
You know, it's funny. This morning I got up and one of my favorite movies was on, and
Mm.
I almost got sucked right into watching it again. And that's The Goodbye Girl. And
Yes.
if you know the show, Richard Dreyfuss gets cast to play Richard III. Is it Richard III he's
It's
playing?
Richard III, yes.
And his director wants him to play it, as uh, really an effeminate homosexual,
Mm-hmm.
which was the complete opposite of everything that he had prepped for, everything he had worked for. But I was thinking about that at that moment, of those moments where sometimes a director may have a completely different vision of what
Mm-hmm.
you should be doing with a part, and it can be frustrating.
Yes, especially if the director is not good at articulating what he or she wants.
And if you have those directors who want to get up and show you every gesture,
You take in what they've done and you do your very best to do what they want and at the same time not compromise your own interpretation of the script.
well, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, we're going to bring on our next guest,
All
but
right.
you're going to actually bring on the guest, and this is your let's make a deal moment.
Oh,
Door
okay.
number one, door number two, or door number three, and I hope you're all ready. And
Yes.
Gary, I hope if you're watching this that you get on. We
Yes.
want you here.
All right. Right now, I'd like you to introduce a very talented actor and also a writer who's got a couple of wonderful pieces in the works and who is a lot of fun and, like me, a fellow baritone. I'd like you all to meet Ron Spivak.
And there he is.
My
I thought that's what
gosh.
you were talking about. So, Ron,
Thank you,
if you want to
Jay.
build
You're
upon
welcome.
anything that we talked about, or if you want to take us in another direction in terms of your work and navigating the waters in this business.
Well, when you had announced that today's topic was thrift, I very nearly choked on my caviar. It was just, what do I do with this? Especially, living in New York City, as I do, and as I know Jay does.
Mhm.
Uh, I know you're in the suburbs, Richard, but you live in New York, and it's impossible to be thrifty, at least on a personal level.
Well, let me
Um,
tell you about Thrifty. On a day like today, for example, we met friends in the city for brunch at Sardi's. For us to come into the city, it's $16 to cross the bridge. It's
mhm.
another $9 on top of that because of congestion pricing. Then it was $50 to park, and then we get to
Yeah.
Sardi's, and of course, we pay for our lunch, and it's an expensive day out.
Oh yeah. And
Mhm.
and usually you're paying all that money to do next to nothing other than just be in the city. Uh, and my wife made the comment that we often go looking for bargains around New York. But usually, when you find a bargain, let's say you're looking for a certain item in the supermarket, and you
Hmm.
say, "Oh, gee, it's $2 cheaper downtown, but it's going to cost you $4 or $8 or even more to take a bus or a cab down there, get the item, and come back." So in the end, you've spent more money than you had intended to in the first place.
Yes.
Well,
But
the next question that I have here for you, and
well,
it goes
sure.
along these lines, is can a limited budget ever be a creative advantage?
I think so. As Jay so wisely pointed out, it can help you strip down to the essentials of the piece. Um, I was good friends with a wonderful composer, the late George Fishoff, who had a show that he had written that had a cast. It was an off Broadway show. It was a moderate success. And he originally wrote it, I think, with a cast of five or six. And it was produced. It had a modest run. But then after it closed, and it did close because they couldn't afford to keep it running,
Mm.
he rewrote the whole piece so that he could perform it himself as a one man show. And he ended up doing that one man version for years and years and years.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think that was, necessity being the mother of invention. So things like that, I think, do happen. Of course, if you have a big budget and you're able to use it.
Mhm.
Of course, you'd like to.
Those are far and few between. You and I,
They sure are.
Jay, I think you would agree with that.
Oh, yes.
And the whole idea, I can't even imagine what it's like for a family of 3 kids that come to New York. They want to see The Lion King, and what the whole evening is going to cost that family.
Oh,
I heard an interview the other day with Sandy Duncan, and she said, "Thank God," I'm quoting her a little off, I think, but she said, "Thank God that they are on certain committees that allow them to see as much theater as they do see," because she says otherwise I would not be able to afford it.
yeah.
Well, speaking of affording, we're going to bring on our next guest, and you door number 1 or door number 2, Ron?
Oh, wow. Door number 2.
And that is my dear friend Kevin. Hello, Kevin, and welcome to the show. Kevin, you can talk about anything that we've spoken about, or you can take us in a completely different direction if you'd like.
Well, I'm going to go away from economic thrift and head toward artistic thrift, because it's something that's been on my mind a lot with things that I've been in lately, and also a lot of things I've seen, which is when playing comedy, it is very good to just get to the essential, pare things away. Other people need not to move, those kind of things that I think a lot of times people do what some directors call putting a hat on a hat, which is doing, something. A lot of times something is just naturally funny. Sometimes you just have to say the line.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a lot of putting a hat on a hat and working with some that do that sometimes. I won't say any names, but
well, it's just us, so you can.
No, I'm not going to, because it's not about that. But it's
I hope it's not just us.
Wonderful people, and I used to be guilty of this myself. And I worked with some people that were like, "No, just get to the end of the line, or do that," And I'd think, "What?" And then you'd see that would get a big laugh or what. It's just something that strikes me lately when I'm seeing things. I think a little bit of simplicity, thrift, perhaps, is another way of putting it, of just sort of the basic, just doing what's on the page and letting it go.
Yeah. The next question that I pulled up was, what's the most resourceful thing that you've ever done to get a show on its feet? I mean, you are a journeyman actor. You, as long as I've known you, it seems to me, I could be right or wrong, but it seems that you work a lot in this business, and you're very, very fortunate to have the career that you have. But have you been on the flip side of that coin, where trying to get a show on its feet is resting on your shoulders?
I just have to admit, I don't think I have actually had to. Because I've just been somebody that has worked in theater mostly and things that are being produced by a producer, So I'm not, the best way I could describe my participation in getting something going is participating in readings and workshops and things like that, where, you are paid a small amount, but, I've done things where you weren't paid just because I knew the writer or knew, that sort of thing. Or last year I did a festival piece for my friend Doug DeVita, who's a great playwright.
Very good friend. Yes.
Yeah. And, we weren't necessarily paid for that. We got some sort of stipend for travel from the festival people, but I didn't even care about that. I wanted Doug's play to get up and going, and I think he's going to have, it was called Goddess of the Hunt, and he's going to have a production at, remember the name of the theater? I'm such a bad friend. The Lab Theater.
The Lab Theater down in St. Petersburg.
Yes. So they're doing, I think they've done another of his plays as well, but he's going to have a production of it. It's a great, fun romp, kind of a little dark comedy, but anyway, I'm a little promotion for Doug, but that I guess that's the best way for me to say how I would help someone getting the show on, because I'm not out there raising money. You know, I'm just there mainly to help the people that wrote it.
Well, let me bring somebody on who is out there doing all those things, because as a cabaret artist, which we both are, Will Nolan has a wonderful show playing Leola Ladyland. And for those of you who have gone through the YouTube channel, the link for his website, which gives more information about that, is all there. And again, I hope that Gary comes on as the artistic director of his theater to talk about this. But I'm going to ask you, Will, the same question that I just asked Kevin, and that's what's the most resourceful thing that you've ever had to do to get a show on its feet? And you do a lot of one-man shows, one-woman shows, I could say, but you travel all over the country doing your show.
Yeah, I've loved this conversation because I have a very thoughtful, planned out economic model, which is don't lose my own money on anything. So because exactly, I'm self-producing. For whatever reason, I decided to dress like a woman to perform. So that adds a whole, like, you have a new appreciation for what women have to go through to put a face on and everything. And
may I stop you for a moment?
Yeah.
Was that decision made solely because that was a choice that you wanted to make in terms of your own artistic bent, or did you do this because you felt that it would be an economical move to make on your part?
So it all came out of the character. The character that I play, Leola, is a 72-year-old lesbian from South Georgia who's on a mission to heal the world and spread the gospel of Kelly Clarkson. And
funny show, guys. Funny show.
In that, it was just necessary. When you start talking about an older Southern woman, there's an expectation that even if she's a lesbian who may be a little more down to earth, she's still going to have a full face on. And, just in case you're in an accident, you always want to have lipstick and but one of the things that I've ever since I moved to New York, like right out of college 1,000 years ago, is I've created my own work, because I quickly realized waiting on other people to find, what I may have to offer or put me in a mold or whatever wasn't going to be my pathway. So by creating my own stuff, that also meant, performing in great spaces like Green Room 42, where I'm in residency, or in, essentially standing up on a stage that's just a wood palette, and, getting dressed in a guy's bathroom at a sports bar to come into full drag. Those kinds of things, it's all just sort of adapting quickly. But the end result, whether, and I think probably most of you can agree, sometimes your best audience is that audience of 4 people versus a full house of 400. Sometimes, crappy lighting and bad tech can still be one of your best shows, because you're pulling it out of your nether regions to overcome all of that. Whereas when you have all of the bells and whistles, sometimes it's like, it can be a little dull. So I everything is funded. I say my unofficial sponsors are Party City and Five Below, where I do all of my shopping. And not to get political, but the tariffs scare me, because I don't think I'm wearing anything made in America or that's a breathable fabric. And those are all super cheap and super thrifty. So.
Well, before we're going to play a little round robin, because I've got some questions here based on this very subject. But before we go there, Will, you have a show coming up.
I do.
Let's
thank
plug
you.
it.
Yes, I have my Pride show is coming up on June 5th at the Green Room 42 at 7:00. It's Pride / Tonys, and the Tonys are essentially the gay Super Bowl anyway. But we're going to be doing, I have Adam Feldman, the theater critic, the head theater critic for Time Out, as one of my guests. I have a great cellist, Aaron Hall, who has a new single out, and a cabaret star, Khan Yasser. I think that's Khan Yasser, right. Great way to say it.
Who's hysterical, by the way, and wonderful.
Hysterical, has a beautiful voice, and so it's going to be a celebration of pride, but also, we'll get down. It'll be like a ESPN sports show, except about Nicole Scherzinger and Audra McDonald going head to head.
Well, throw Betty Boop into that mix as well.
Exactly.
I think she's going to give them both a run for their money. That's my take on this. So, guys, let's get thrifty.
Okay.
And I've got some questions here, and I'm going to start with you, Jay.
All
and
right.
The question is: do you believe that constraint leads to innovation in the arts?
Oh, definitely. When you don't have a pile of resources at your fingertips, you're forced really to do the very best you can with the limited amount of resources. And sometimes you can come up with sheer genius. For example, I'm working in a choral group right now, and due to various and sundry budget cuts and lack of grant money, we cannot afford to use a full orchestra for our upcoming concert. This is the Oratorio Society of Queens, which is going to happen on Sunday, May 18th at the Performing Arts Center at Queensborough Community College in Bayside, New York. And so we have to use piano. And sometimes it's piano, organ, and maybe a small bit of percussion. And with some of the works, well, actually, with all of the works, really, it works very well because we don't have to fight our way onto the stage around an orchestra. And people have said that they can hear the sonorities of the chorus better without the orchestra. Now, in a perfect world, we would have constant money so we could
absolutely
pay an orchestra. But we do what we can, and I think we've had some very successful concerts.
That's wonderful, and all of us, we would love to perform with full orchestras.
Yes,
but let's face it, there are a lot of great pianists out there who sound like full orchestras.
Absolutely.
So let's acknowledge them as well. Ron, the question that I have for you is: how have you reused or repurposed material in your works?
Well, it's funny. I had a show a few years ago. It was a two-man show that I toured up and down the West Coast with another singer. And we were both similar vocal qualities. So the show was called It's Better with a Baritone. And we did that show with a full symphony orchestra in one location. We did it with a trio in another location. We took it into an old age home and did it with just a piano. We did every possible combination that you could think of. And because the show had some great material in it, and because we felt very secure in what we were doing, it always worked.
Now, there are two projects that I know of that you're working on.
Yes.
One, I don't know if you can talk about or not, but the one that is coming closer to fruition. Why don't you tell everyone about that?
It is a musical version of the famous Japanese tale Rashomon, and it was actually adapted as a Broadway play. The original film was in 1950. The play was on Broadway in 1959. And now we're repurposing it as a musical. One of the decisions, and speaking of Thrift, one of the decisions I think we made very wisely was not to try to add a chorus. In fact, we've even cut a few of the principal characters. So we now have a show consisting of 6 people. Actually, no, 7 people. The 7th is non-speaking. But we have found, much to our surprise and to our delight, that people have praised us for paring it down the way we did. And we were doing it for artistic reasons.
Mhm.
But people have said to us over and over again, oh, this is going to be much easier to produce because you have such a small cast. We think there's going to be a lot more demand for this in this complicated
Mhm.
theatrical market now. So I guess hopefully we're making the right decisions. We had a reading back in January. We're in the midst of heavy rewrites right now,
And you've
and
got a great team. You've got an
we have a
amazing team.
wonderful team. The son of the original Broadway playwrights, Michael and Faye Kanan, wrote the play. Their son Josh is working with me on adapting the book, and it was his idea to do it in the first place. And our composer is the wonderful Japanese composer Michiru Oshima, who I guess is best known for having written the scores to two Godzilla films.
Ah,
Mhm.
there's your
Uh,
next musical.
there you go. In fact,
Wow.
we have one number in Rashomon where we couldn't quite get a handle on it, and it's supposed to be this woman really kind of going into a rage against these two men who are annoying the hell out of her. And I said to Michiru, why don't you write this as if you were writing a song for Godzilla? And she did, and it was perfect. So
That's
go
great.
figure.
Fingers are crossed on all of that.
Thank
Kevin,
you.
this next question could come either to your art or life in general as an artist. What's a creative solution that you have come up with when money was tight? Or if you would like to give a specific time where money was so tight and how you got through that period.
Well, actually, maybe the answer to both of those is that I had a period, this was maybe in the late 90s, where just wasn't work happening. And several of my friends, we were sort of all feeling the same way, and they were all singers. So we decided, well, let's just put together, this sounds so traditional, but just put together singing Christmas music, because it was like 3 months before Christmas, and we thought maybe we can find venues to sing this Christmas music in, and we did end up doing it. We did it at a couple of parties. I don't think we even got paid, to be honest, but then we did do one big gig at a event in Connecticut. I don't even remember how we got that job, to tell you the truth, but that was just out of the frustration of sitting around and talking to people and going, well, I mean, Christmas is coming up. We can sing Christmas, but that kind of it wasn't anything more than that. And we actually made some money doing it. But yeah.
And you have something to fall back on every year.
Yeah, thankfully we've never had to, but
That's good.
But yeah, it was a nice group of friends that were. Several of us are still very good friends, but yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind when you said both versions of that question. But I also wanted to comment, just thought of something about, this goes to, I think, what Jay was talking about when you have to just, the economic necessity of something actually makes something better.
Yes.
Maybe, I'm not sure if that was exactly what you were saying, but I always use the example because I was involved in the original production of Young Frankenstein on Broadway, which was a mammoth production. We were at then it was called the Hilton. It's where Harry Potter's playing, that big, massive theater where it was built for ragtime.
Yes.
It was just too big for our show, and our set was massive and blah, blah, blah. So, there were other issues with the show as well, but we all had a wonderful time doing it, but it wasn't received very well, and we all sort of were disappointed in that. It went out on a tour. They cut it down a little bit to tour it. I actually went out and filled in on that tour for 6 weeks, and I saw it before I went into it, and I went, oh, well, this is better than what we had, because it's tighter. Like, the laboratory isn't like this massive play, Then they cut, that was an first class tour. Then they cut it down to like a lower level economic tour. and they were touring through Rochester, New York when I was doing a play there, and I had friends in it, and I went to see it, and it was even smaller, and it was even better.
Wow.
And then they did it in London. Stroh and Mel Brooks and everybody got together again and came up with this production for London, which was very small, which if you think of the movie is just those main characters for the most part. There's not some big ensemble doing dance numbers, you know. There are townspeople, but whatever. Yeah. That I happened to be able to see that in London, and it was like they finally cracked the, you know, I mean, it was like, this is the perfect version of it. And things had been taken out. I had a song in the first version that no longer existed, but it didn't need to be there. It was just excessive. So I thought of that earlier when you were talking about how, I mean, they weren't doing this to make it cheaper, but the tour, you know, they were like, we have to tour, so we have to streamline it, or, you know.
Well, they have to make it economical also.
Right. Those issues came into play. And I think that just seeing the whole process, I thought every time it's getting smaller, it's getting better, you know. And
I'm sure that you all know, and Jay is the expert in this department, but you all know of moments of shows that were so massive in the ways that they were produced on Broadway that it was just prohibitive to take those shows on the road.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is a perfect example. And also the massiveness, I think, got in the way of the comedy.
Wow.
Because of the very thing I was talking about earlier, which was, you know, streamlining things, making things clear and precise. And so, I mean, I'm still very glad I did the first version because I love all the people that were involved and everything. But it's just been a real lesson to see how that, and now people do that show all the time.
Yes.
They do it everywhere. And community theaters do it, which is great because the people know the movie, they love the characters because they're sort of iconic spoofs of iconic characters, you know, and kids love it. And it's so satisfying that they finally found what made it work, which was to just rein it in, make it a little tighter and a little easier to produce.
That's great. Will, this next question is perfect for you. And the question is, and I know the answer before I even ask, have you ever built a set, a costume, or a prop from something found or donated? And you mentioned that, you know, Party City. How do you, I mean, resourcefully go with costumes and sets? And I mean, your productions, I've been there. It doesn't look cheap. You know, it looks like all of the elements are in place, but you make it work based on all these other elements that you're able to make it happen.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's easier to have a character, to be playing a character with regularity that has no aesthetic. So the bar is set real low when you walk in. So that helps. From there, though, I grew up in the South. The character is very rooted in sort of my own Southern heritage, and I don't throw things away. I have an attic full of stuff. And when I really started committing to performing Leola more regularly, I found a lot of, exactly to your question, I found a lot of things that I was like, and also just from self-producing stuff for 30 years in this neck of the woods, I did sketch comedy. Like anything could be a funny prop. So I've been a bit of a hoarder when it comes to that, I guess. But also one of the cool things has been, as people come to the shows, they will bring stuff to me that they think works, or they'll find someone will be on a trip and like, Leola's colors are rainbow. So anything rainbow is, people are grabbing for me. So I inherit a lot of things that way. And then having people in the industry who have something that they think is god awful is usually like, it's perfect for me. The most expensive thing are the shoes, because for whatever reason, I feel like the character needs to wear heels, and I'm 6'1", so if I can wear a 6-inch heel and just tower over people, it's just that much more fun. So that's the only real expense I have.
Well, that's great. Jay, your question is, how do you balance thrift with quality? in your performances or your productions?
Mm. I would say that you concentrate really on doing your best work. Uh, and the bells and whistles, as it were, become sort of tertiary importance,
Mhm.
really. As we're always told throughout our training, concentrate on the work. Concentrate on what the playwright, if you're doing a musical, what the librettist and the composer and the lyricist and the choreographer have given to you. And sometimes the audience alone can supply its own bells and whistles. I cite the current production of Sunset Boulevard. Those of us who saw the Trevor Nunn production with the house, the stairs flying in, and the house.
That was one of those productions that I referred to earlier. That was a show that did not go on the road to the extent that it could have gone on the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But here, you can use your imagination and create Norma's house. You can create the movie studio. You can create the back lots. And, this is something that I think that sort of thrift, once again, has become an asset to the piece.
I think sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think that, I love when the curtain goes up, when there is a curtain that goes up, and you
Yes.
see an incredible set on stage. And, and just having back projections to me is, if I want to see a movie, I'll go see a movie. I want to see the magic of the creative team creating something magical in the theater. Ron,
Here, here.
is there a moment when financial restraint led to something better than you originally envisioned?
Oh my gosh. I honestly can't think of anything. No, financial restraints are always something that you're fighting to get beyond. Obviously, you're trying to find solutions. If something is financially prohibitive, you have to find another way of doing it. I was very lucky with Rashomon. We just did a reading, as I said, in January, and we had a major cast of all named people. And I really wasn't sure I was going to be able to afford to produce or pay these people. And it was just a reading. And at the last minute, a very generous donor came along and basically said, how much do you need? And here's a check. And almost, I won't say she gave me a blank check, but very nearly.
Wow. That's
So
always nice.
I've been very fortunate in that regard. But I can't say that I can think of any time when not having that money has been an asset. I don't think it should stop you. I would like to, if I may, I'd like to switch briefly to something else that is kind of related to this, and that's when you talk about thrift in production, and I mean thrift that is intentional. I know all of us here have been in big productions where you're wearing the wig and the body mic and you're just covered with tons of wires and everything going on. And I think the audience doesn't realize the degree to which that can distance you as a performer from the character and from them. I mean, I did a run of Man of La Mancha where I felt sometimes as Don Quixote in the armor and the body, the microphone, and then everything on top of that. I felt like a robot lumbering around the stage,
Mhm.
and it is much more comfortable to be able to just get on an intimate stage, have it be just you and the audience. You think of things like the Fantastics, where there's no microphones, at least the way it was done originally.
I don't know if any of you have seen the interview on Actors on Acting with
Hmm.
Patti LuPone and George Clooney, which is incredible. And I love what she has to say about the way the sound system is in theaters nowadays.
Oh
Sometimes
yeah,
it's difficult to know where the voices are coming from.
Mhm.
And she talked about James Earl Jones. If any of you were lucky enough to see him on stage, that
yes,
voice hit the back row and just bounced right back to him.
Yeah.
And I would love to see less. I was walking past the St. James Theater today, and I see all the pictures of the actors in front, and the microphone is so prominently displayed in every single picture.
Yes.
yeah.
And when did that begin to happen? That it's this sense that we're going to a concert
Mhm.
instead of going to
Mhm.
theater, where these are characters living their lives. And you talk about all the accoutrements, Ron, that go into these costumes, and I feel the very same way about a microphone. I remember, I'm old enough to remember, when you did everything you could to hide that you were wearing a microphone.
Right.
When did that change? Anyone?
I
Rent.
want to say Rent.
Yeah, I
Rent.
was going to say
Yeah.
Rent
Yeah.
because they made a point of, I mean, which for the piece, you knew it was mic'd because it was rock and
Mhm.
it sounded mic'd, so that didn't
It
hurt.
was also, yeah, and it was big in pop culture then too, because
Yeah.
you had Janet Jackson,
Madonna.
you had
The
Madonna, yeah, you had the pop stars doing it as well.
Yeah. I refer to them as the Ernestine microphones.
Wow. Wow. Kevin,
They're here.
I want to ask you, what role does Thrift play in preserving the spirit of grassroots theater or cabaret?
Oh, I mean, I think it's sort of everything because it's all about people like what Will was describing, how he comes up with his show. I haven't seen your show, Will. I'm dying to see it now after you described the character. But I think those kind of things are products of the fact that you don't have a costume budget or you don't have you're just throwing it together. But sometimes the most wonderful inspirations come from that moment of just looking in the closet and grabbing something. I'm going to name drop here for a minute, but it's also referencing Young Frankenstein, strangely. Andrea Martin was in Young Frankenstein with me, and I was such a fan of SCTV.
Oh, you and me both.
On there.
Me
Oh
too.
my God. And all the
here.
people from SCTV came and saw the show, so I got to meet them all, and I was just in heaven. And I would literally like lines to Andrea, and she'd answer back as Mrs. Falbo or Edith Prickly or whatever. But she told me, speaking of Edith, remember her character Edith Prickly that was
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Loved her.
Yeah.
She said that character was created in the moment of an improv that she and Catherine O'Hara were doing on stage at the Second City Theater in Toronto before SCTV. And she said it was like a hat from Catherine O'Hara's mother's closet or something that was brought in, and they literally would put the prop on stage, and someone would just start talking to them as a character that wore that hat. And I think I may be wrong about this, but it was something like she threw this hat on, and Catherine O'Hara looked at her and said, "Well, Miss Prickly, what do you think?" And she just like immediately created this character, Edith Prickly, on the spot, which that became like her calling card for years, was the character.
Yes.
But I think that's a great example of like just a hat, just something that was sitting around in a house can inspire a great character, and that's often the thrift aspect of it, or the lack of money or whatever is what puts you in the position to have to come up with something like that.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story. I had a dear friend, unfortunately, who passed away several years ago, George Bettinger. And I was out seeing a show one night, and he saw me, and he says, "Richard, I'm getting married. I want you to sing at my wedding." Well, you've heard the expression, "I want you to dance at my wedding. I want you to sing at my wedding." I got an invitation to the wedding, and it said nothing about me singing at the wedding. So I didn't want to put him on the spot and say, "Am I singing at your wedding, or am I just going to get an impromptu?" At the time, this was when I was performing as Carol Channing, and I was headlining at Trump's Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. And I came in for the wedding. And I get there, and the first person I see as I'm walking in was Jamie DeRoy. And she said, "Richard, I'm so excited that you're performing tonight." I said, "Where did you get the idea that I'm performing?" In the program, it said, "Direct from Atlantic City, Richard Skipper as Carol Channing."
Boy.
And of course, I'm there in a tux.
Wow.
I have costumes. I don't have anything. And I went up to him and I said, "George, I thought you were joking when you asked me to sing at your wedding." And he said, "You'll figure something out." So I got up, and this was right after Carol Channing was coming through her end of marriage to Charles. And I got up as Carol, and I says, "I'm sure all of you have been reading about this in the paper. I'm incognito today." And I did the whole thing with no makeup, no costumes. But I performed at his wedding. So
Perfect.
Excellent.
So, Will, are there elements of old school showbiz resourcefulness that you feel that we have lost today in terms of how theater and or cabaret is being produced?
100%. Yeah, I think my biggest influence was the Carol Burnett show, and that idea of variety shows, sketch shows. I mean, Saturday Night Live kind of holds on to some of it. I mean, sometimes the best sketches are the ones where, regardless of the writing, the set's kind of falling apart, and but it's all about that, just that sort of that scrappiness. Like Kevin was saying, that idea of you throw on a hat and all of a sudden you have a whole world has been created. What I loved about Carol Burnett, and yes, it was Bob Mackie costumes, but they weren't all, what we think of as a Bob Mackie gown now. They were just whatever served the character. And there was that sort of let's go paint the barn and put on a show feel week after week, regardless of the stars that were on. And that's what, and God knows people have tried to recreate that sort of magic in more modern times. I think it was it Martin Short and Maya Rudolph tried to do a variety, like it,
and Rosie O'Donnell.
Rosie O'Donnell. It's something will happen at some point where it'll come back, and to a great extent, that's what TikTok is. Like the content on social media now has some of that scrappy, thrifty sort of vibe to it. But yeah, I miss that things have to be so polished and so slick, which includes, a lot of the professional theater we've been talking about before it can be considered consumable. I think there's something about the seeing works in progress that feel very organic and dangerous that audiences love. We just don't trust audiences to embrace it.
Absolutely. We're going to do one more round of questions, and then I'm going to give each of you a chance to have your final word of the day, which we'll talk about in a moment, or your final thoughts of the day. Jay, the question for you is, how do you instill a sense of pride and professionalism when working on a shoestring budget?
Several things. When you're working, sometimes, let's say you're working for a theater company and you have very little rehearsal time, and you've got a piece that has already been published and the material is available. There's no law that says you can get off book in the weeks beforehand. You know, I mean, there's some actors who will say, well, I'm not on contract yet, and I'm not going to start working on it until I start the thing. But no, we don't have time for that. Making oneself open to, doing that independent work so that the rehearsal process can be as smooth as possible.
Amen.
Here, here.
I agree with you.
I mean, there are some cases, of course, where that's not going to be possible. I mean, when the material isn't available. Like, I use the musical Ari as an example.
Wow.
I mean, that material is not readily available. But if you're doing Carousel, if you're doing Oklahoma, if you're doing Camelot, that material is there and it's at your fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
Make use of that and learn the material in advance.
Wow. Well, and Kevin, of course, how many productions of Dolly have you been in, Kevin? But Leroy
Several.
Reams, his advice to every actress who's played Dolly is be off book, at least in the eating scene, before your first day of rehearsal, because it's such a complicated scene to do. And so much that you're thinking about what's my next line? When do I pick up the fork? When do I do this? Everything is going there. Ron, what's a favorite thrifty trick or tool that you rely on in your work?
A trick or tool. I think similarly to Jay, I think it's just to be prepared and to be confident in the character that you're playing. And if you do have that opportunity to be off book before the first day of rehearsal, then why not? I mean, you're the one who's going to look foolish if you're not prepared. You can't lean on anyone else and say, oh, it's their fault. You're the one who's up there. You're the one who is basically putting your reputation and your persona on the line.
The buck stops with you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Kevin, how do you create magic on stage when the funds aren't magical?
Oh, the magic is within you.
That sounds like a song cue to me.
No, I mean, I think honestly, my feeling, and this goes along with what everyone else just previously said, is, to me, the essential things you need are the material and the actor and the stage to do it on, and it's like, once you have that, I think that gets back to what I was saying originally about thrift in comedy. It's like, just the essence of what you're doing is what is the most essential thing. Well, that's redundant. The essence is essential. But I mean, that, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
you are.
I just feel like you don't need all the bells and whistles all the time. And sometimes they help. Sometimes they're a lot of fun, but you realize that I see this a lot when you see things in a rehearsal studio or like a workshop presentation of something. Sometimes it's better in the rehearsal studio, and then you get on stage and with all the bells and whistles and the sets and mics and everything, and it's lost something because there was more immediate thing happening in that rehearsal studio where you didn't have all the costumes and everything else. So I think you just have to rely on the material and your own resourcefulness, your own sense of what it means to you in the moment. And like what Jay was saying, it will be created in everyone's minds, a lot of that other stuff. Yeah. But I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does answer my question.
To say it anyway.
My brain's already spinning around. Well, this is our last question of the day, but the question for you is, and this is going to be right up your alley, can you share a time when improvisation saved the day for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, My shows are always scripted and very planned out, and then I sort of between what's best for the character and also age, it disappears when I go out there. So a good portion of what I do is improvisation, and I think for what I'm doing in particular, there's a lot of audience interaction, and so they love it when there's something that feels, you can tell when something just happened. I interview people, as you know, Richard, and that you can't control that. There's a lot of improv to that, but I have definitely had times. I did a show. It was just a couple of days after the election. And it was in Hudson, New York. And the show that I was doing is called Gay History for Straight People. And so it's sort of going through the history of the LGBTQ plus community from A to Z. And it's all completely inaccurate and wrong. And people did not want to laugh. And so I left the script many times just to make people feel like it was okay to be sitting where they were in their emotions and their feelings at that time. But yeah, and then there's always the heckler thing, when you're doing something and somebody thinks that they're funny, especially when alcohol is involved, and you have to be there too, because it's your responsibility. I don't think it's about demeaning the person or whatever they're saying, but I think the audience is trusting you to get the ship back on path and back on course. And so you have to sort of save that moment and make them feel safe again, and hopefully shut down whatever the craziness is that's popping up.
Absolutely. And careers have been lost over artists going after a heckler on stage. If it's done wrong, you can lose everything.
Yep.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here today. And Gary, I don't know what happened, but I want you back. I love Gary Powers from the Revolution Stage Company, and he does incredible work. If any of you are in Palm Springs, go and see the work that they do at the Revolution Stage Company. As I said before, I'm going to give each of you a chance to have your final word of the day. It could be about anything that we spoke about today, or it could be something that we didn't say that you wish we had, or just any message you want to leave everyone with. It doesn't have to be on topic. And I'm going to pick the next person, and then you'll pick the person after that. And when the last person says goodbye, the show will end, so you don't have to worry about how do I get out of here. I'll take care of that. And again, thank you all for your patience. The gremlins were in the computer today. My big takeaway from everything that we talked about today is that it's not always out there, it's in here. And it's what we bring to the table as artists, as producers, as directors, and as audience members as well. It's what we all bring to the table. So it's very, very important that we celebrate each other. A one-man show can be just as powerful as a show with 50 people in it. I went to see a production of Hello, Dolly last summer in Pennsylvania, and there were 14 in the cast. And it was the smallest production that I've ever seen, but it was one of the most powerful productions that I felt that Dolly had a connection with each and every one of those townspeople in a way that you don't always see in a bigger production of Dolly. So, it's, when you go into the theater and you hear that they're going to be on tracks, which I'm not a big fan of tracks, but some people make it work. And if it works for them in that moment, just let go and go for the ride. So the message that I always end all of my shows with is to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. That's one thing that we can all be thrifty with. And, when you go to your emails, and the second email, I want all of you to do this, and I want you to report back to me.
Okay.
The second email that you get today from someone that you know, rather than responding with an email, respond with a phone call. And let that person know the impact that they've made on your life. And by doing so, you're going to make an impact on their life. It's very important. As my dear friend Sean Moniger says, we're all in the same storm, but we're in different size boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And with that, I'm going to leave the screen. And Ron, I'm turning it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Wow. Well, I hope I always get to have a skipper on board because you are indeed a treasure. And I think my phone call is probably going to be to you. So uh, thank you so much. And it's so great to meet Kevin and Will and Jay, of course, I've known for many years, and you're a delight. Um, I think talking about thrift, just to get back to the topic, uh, I think if you're talking about thrift, particularly in live performance, whether it be in the theater or cabaret, anything similar to that, I think the most important thing is the people out there, the people who are performing, and it's that bond, that level of communication. And as long as you have that, you don't need anything else. You can create a whole universe just with that eye contact and that level of communication where you can come off stage. And now I'm speaking as a performer, but when you come off stage at the end of something and you think, oh, I brought that audience or that person or whoever, however few are out there, that I brought them from point A to point B, and that they will leave hopefully better people than they were when they came in. And with that, I will thank you very much again, and I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Okay. Well, thank you, Richard, if you're out there somewhere for this. This was wonderful. I loved getting to meet all you guys, and anyway, just love meeting new people. But, I guess I'm going to go off message a little bit just to talk about the time that we live in and what we're all collectively going through. And I just think that what we do is pretty needed right now. And if it's cabaret, if it's theater, big opera, whatever, it's basically people coming together in a room and sharing a story. And I think we have to really focus on the story that we're telling right now and make sure that what we're doing is not, this maybe goes back to the thrift thing about all the extra stuff that you don't need. If it's against telling the story, you don't need it. Just chuck it, get rid of it. And I think our positions as storytellers right now is really needed. And it's beyond politics. It's beyond the damn phone and all this stuff that I have a lot of issues about, but which I love as well. But it's about one-to-one personal contact and the contact you feel as an artist in front of an audience, communicating your story, telling your story. Make sure that that's the most important thing. And so I'm going to choose Leola Ladyland Will Nolan.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you, Richard, for having me on. And like everyone said, it's been great to meet this group. My takeaway is create your own magic. There shouldn't be, the only barrier is you. And so if you have a story to tell, if you think you have something that can make someone's little postage stamp of the earth a little bit better, then tell that story, and don't let things like economics and props and all the other things be a distraction. Just focus on telling the story. And I will choose Jay.
Thank you, Will. Richard, thank you for gathering us all together. It's been delightful, as it always is. I think that the whole thing is about courage, not allowing a group of people or one person to say you can't, because what happens when there is a problem, when there is a crisis? What do we turn to? We turn to music, we turn to television, we turn to art, we turn to literature, and we cannot turn away from that. This is what keeps us going. And as performers, as artists, we have to keep it going. So let's keep it going. Thanks so much.